Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October 11th, 2021 meeting of the City County Utility Commission. I hereby call the meeting to order and turn it over to Ms. Glenn for the roll.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the roll for the utility meeting today. I'll start with Chairman Randall Tuttle.
Present.
Vice Chairman Wesley Curtis.
Present.
Commissioner Harold Day.
Present.
Commissioner Tom Griffin.
Present.
Commissioner Yvonne Hines did send us a notice and said she wouldn't be here today. Commissioner Hugh Jernigan.
Present.
Commissioner Dwayne Long.
Present.
Commissioner Chris Parker.
Present.
Commissioner Charles Wilson.
Present.
And Commissioner Allen Younger.
I'm present. I'll be physical in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Patrice.
You're welcome.
Again, welcome, everyone. A lot to go over today. We're going to learn a lot about lead and copper from our friends at from Black and Veatch, and Courtney's got other interesting tidbits in her comments. So without further ado, Ms. Driver.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Utility Commission. First, I will announce who's on the call from staff and the guests that we have. Myself, Courtney Driver, Utilities Director, Aaron King, Interim Assistant City Manager, Patrice Glenn, Senior Administrative Assistant, Mike Clavisto, Deputy Director, Jan McHarg, Assistant Director of Solid Waste, Michael Stover, Assistant Director of Operations, Bill Brewer, Water Treatment Superintendent, Shane Chu Huffman, Capital Projects Engineer, Todd Lewis, Senior Civil Engineer, Gail Keller, our Public Information Officer, Lisa Saunders, Chief Financial Officer, Kelly Latham, Deputy Financial Officer, Jerry Bates, Purchasing Director, Marilena Jensen-Gushold, Assistant City Attorney, Heather Curry, Budget Office, Kirk Buerling, Real Estate Administrator, and looking to see, do we have Jakira Westbrook, Office of Business Inclusion and Advancement. And then the two guests that we have with us today are Mike Osborne and Emily Tummins with Black and Veatch that will be presenting on the lead and copper roll revisions. With that, I'm going to share my screen real quickly. Okay. I do want to point out this picture. So for those that were on the commission in 2019, we had a tour of the Nelson Water Treatment Plant, and so this was a picture taken during that tour. Obviously, this is pre the pandemic, before COVID hit, and it's an in-person meeting, and I just really liked the meeting, so I wanted to like the picture, so I wanted to point that out. Do have a couple of announcements for you this afternoon. Again, we have Black and Veatch with us to present on the lead and copper roll revisions, then water, wastewater, and solid waste updates, followed by the agenda items, and we'll finish up with our CIP update. So just a reminder that next Tuesday at 3 p.m. is we'll have a finance committee meeting to go over the cost of service study. It'll be a work session with Raf Tellis. The last cost of service study was in 2017. So we're going to start the new study, and hopefully with the goal of wrapping that up by the time the budget kicks off next March. So the ERAP application lab continues at Forsyth County Department of Social Services. The ERAP stands for Emergency Rental and Assistance Program. So far, Forsyth County and Winston-Salem funds that have been dispersed to water and sewer customers from April 9th through September 9th of 2021 is $124,175. Michael Stover will go over ductile iron versus PVC pipe. He's going to talk through why we currently require ductile iron for the majority of our waterline installations. And this is in response to emails that were sent to the board recently from representatives from PVC Pipe Association. So he'll go over that shortly. The city manager is going to be recommending a vaccination policy. And it will follow the guidelines from the federal mandate, which says that companies and entities with over 100 employees have to require their employees to be vaccinated or have weekly testing. So that the city manager will be discussing that with the city council this week, starting in the committee meetings. The policy will include a pay incentive for those employees that are vaccinated. And the goal would be for the policy to be effective sometime at the end of October, so at the end of this month. And the last thing I want to update the commission on is currently we have 64 departmental vacancies, which is the highest that we have seen in several years. So it's concerning to us. I don't think we're alone in this area. There's several companies that are struggling with vacancies. But we internally have been discussing options of how we want to recruit and retain employees, how we're going to continue to monitor our staffing level, our service levels with the shortage we have in staff. And, you know, there's a lot to unpack there. I don't want to bog us down with getting into that right now. I did want to mention it, and I saw we could get through the rest of our presentations, and then at the end of the meeting, if anybody has any questions concerning our vacancies or about the options that we're considering or questions that you might have, then maybe we can revisit it at the end of the meeting today and discuss it in more detail if there's time. So with that, I'm going to pull up the Black & Veatch presentation and turn it over to Mike, I guess. Let me see. Mike, I don't know if it's you or Emily going first, so.
It's me.
Okay. Okay, there you go. Can you see it?
I do not.
You do not. Does anybody else see it?
Not yet.
Okay, it's taking a while to get through then. Hold on. Let me try it again.
There it goes, Courtney.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Osborne.
Sorry, Mike, I was on the wrong page.
That's okay, Courtney. Thank you. As Courtney mentioned, my name is Mike Osborne. I'm a senior project manager for Black & Veatch, and joining me today is Emily Tummins, who's a process engineer and our lead and copper expert, who's been following and studying the new rule revisions that the EPA has issued for lead and copper. So, Courtney, if you would advance. So what I wanted to do was just give you a brief history of the lead and copper rule and how we have arrived here today with the rule revisions. So in 1986, Congress amended the Safe Drinking Water Act to prohibit the use of lead and like lead pipe and lead solder in public water systems. So that was a key date in this whole lead and copper rule from the regulatory perspective, that at that time lead was banned. And so up until that time, utilities were able to use lead, and a lot of times they used lead pipe or lead goosenecks because the pipe is very malleable and it's easy to make connections from a service line into, like, say, the meter and then into the house. And then in 1991, the EPA published the lead and copper rule, and the intent there was to monitor water quality at the customer's tap. And so that required sampling and maintaining records to make sure water quality was maintained. And then utilities would have to take action depending on what the sample results were. And then in 1996, the Safe Drinking Water Act was amended further to restrict lead materials in the water system. And this actually advanced into like plumbing fixtures and into the customers' homes. So it reduced the lead content that could be in, like, say, a faucet or the interior plumbing. And the lead and copper rule continues to be modified. In fact, have been multiple revisions since 2000 to address needs as they've developed. So I want to point out that all utilities are required to comply with the lead and copper rule and its revisions. And I also wanted to note that Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Utilities has maintained high water quality and compliance with the lead and copper rule, since its inception. So really good shape with meeting regulatory requirements. So that's kind of a brief history of what's occurred in the past. And now I'm going to turn it over to Emily. And Courtney, if you can advance to the next slide. And she's going to talk with us about how we arrived here today and what's driving these revisions. Emily?
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Hey, everybody. Yeah, my name's Emily Tummins, as Mike mentioned. So all of us have heard about lead in the news. It's become a much bigger talking point as it's gotten onto the public side a bit more, especially in the wake of Flint, Michigan back in 2015 and 2016. And unfortunately, that still is carrying on to today. But this is really the breaking point in which the EPA determined that changes need to be made to the lead and copper rule. Mike laid out the history, but now there's a bigger push on trying to get utilities to be proactive, make changes before the water quality gets to the place that it did in Flint, and trying to avoid some of these issues where changes were made within water treatment or within operations or taking on a new system or a new source water without understanding all of the downstream impacts and how that could cause health concerns for customers. So again, Flint, Michigan was really the tipping point for all of this, but there have been other large utilities, large cities that have had lead issues in recent history that have kind of kept this as a top news story and really pushed the EPA to make changes. So what I've done is I've taken a very detailed and sometimes overwhelming rule in the lead and copper rule revisions, and I've broken it out into 7 components that I wanted to walk through with you all today. So the first piece really is the action level. So the lead and copper rule is not determined based on maximum contaminant levels like most of the drinking water standards. The lead and copper rule is based on an action level. So you're taking those samples at customers' taps, and if your 90th percentile of those samples exceeds the action level for either lead or copper, then a utility has to do a number of changes, either looking for where those materials are, where the sources of lead are, making those replacements, and then also looking at, can the water chemistry be optimized to minimize the leaching of lead or copper? So it's important to know that the lead action level has not changed with this revision. It's staying at 15 micrograms per liter or parts per billion. The copper action level has not changed either. That still is at 1.3 milligrams per liter. And the main thing here is, again, trying to switch from reactive to proactive. And so the EPA has added in a trigger level. So if that 90th percentile based on your lead and copper rule compliance sampling comes back above 10 micrograms per liter, then new actions have to occur. Again, it's just trying to get water quality as good as it can be. And this rule really impacts every water utility across the country, no matter what the compliance history has been. So again, as Mike mentioned, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County's utilities has always been in compliance with the lead and copper rule, but there are components of the rule that every utility now has to abide by. So if we can go to the next slide. So service line inventory. So this is one of those new changes that every utility has to do. So it's trying to determine what materials are present from the main to a customer's home or a building or a residence. And so this inventory for utilities has to be made public. For a utility the size of Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, that inventory has to be put on a website that's available to the customers. And those service line materials have to be qualified in 4 different ways. First, if it's a lead service line, that is the highest risk for customers for leaching lead. So that's one category. The next is galvanized requiring replacement, meaning that there was a lead service line upstream and then galvanized pipe downstream. And that galvanized pipe can kind of act like a sponge to hold on to lead particulate that could have broken loose from various activities or disturbances to that pipe since it was installed. So this is classified as galvanized requiring replacement. And then there's the component of the unknowns. So the lead status unknown service lines. Many service lines are owned by the utility, and within Winston-Salem, Forsyth County utilities, the customer owns the service line. So that service line could have been installed without notifying the utility what the pipe material is. So within your records, that information could be missing. So that this is unknown. And in many utilities, the service line ownership is split between the utility and the customer. And so, again, there could be unknowns there. And the last category is the non-lead. So as Mike pointed out in his timeline, after 1986, lead pipes were banned. So after that date, it can be known that it's not lead. But then within a utility's records, there could be decisions that were made that at this date, we only installed copper pipe, or we only installed PEX or PVC or whatever it may be, but as long as it can be disclosed as non-lead. So the next slide shows a schematic of what I mean by a service line. So again, for Winston-Salem, Forsyth County utilities, the entire service line is owned by the customer, but the utility maintains the service line from the main to the meter. So that's how the service line is broken down within the utility system. But this information needs to go into the inventory and be made public as part of this rule. So the next slide talks about a replacement plan. So first you have to develop your inventory, and then for any utility that has lead service lines, galvanized requiring replacement, or unknown service line materials, then a service line replacement plan has to be developed. It has to be submitted to the state for approval. It needs to include things like, how are you going to talk to your customers? What are the standard operating protocols for how a service line replacement would occur? What type of notification, what percentage of your service lines would be replaced per year if the utility's 90th percentile were to exceed the new trigger level. And then it also has to have a plan for prioritization. So why are you replacing this service line before you replace this service line? So trying to figure out where the highest risk is, and then making sure that it's equitable across the entire distribution system. The next component is actually the replacement. So either a utility can be proactive and start replacing lead service lines as soon as they're found, or utilities could wait until they're forced into replacements, like if they exceed that trigger level. But whenever a replacement occurs, it's not just a simple construction project. There are some other components. So since you'll be on private property with the customer owning the service line, there needs to be that notification component as well as education to the customer to understand how to minimize their risk for lead. Then the contractors or construction crews need to be trained on the best protocols for how to remove the service line. Even under the best circumstances, there still could be lead particulate that's released. So there's a process called whole house flushing, where you systematically go through and open up taps to try and get that lead particulate out. And then even in the best circumstances, there still could be some lead remaining. So to do best by the customer, the utility provides a pitcher filter with a cartridge that lasts for at least 6 months so that the customer can filter their water from their kitchen tap. And then within a 3 to 6 month time frame after the replacement, a follow-up sample needs to be provided to ensure that the lead levels have indeed decreased. So that's the replacement component. Then there is also a change to the sampling protocols and how you select which locations get sampled. So there's now a new tier structure for those decisions. So it's prioritizing the lead service lines. So again, if lead service lines are found in the distribution system, that becomes the highest risk for lead leaching. So your lead and copper sample sites need to focus on those locations first. And so if a lead service line is found, then you collect your first liter of water, and that will be sampled for copper. And then your second, third, and fourth liters will be sampled and set to the side. They won't be tested. And the fifth liter will be sampled for lead. And the purpose here is you're trying to capture the water that was stagnant within the service line. So typically about a liter of water captures 8 feet of premise plumbing. And so that's why the purpose for doing the first liter for copper, you're getting the copper pipe underneath the faucet and the fixture that likely is brass and containing high levels of copper. And then you're trying to focus in on that lead service line with the fifth liter. There are some changes for what happens based on the results. So you have to notify a customer within 3 days if their lead service or if their sample comes back with a lead level greater than that action level of 15 micrograms per liter. And then it falls into this find and fix category. So the utility is required to do follow-up sampling with that customer, trying to identify the source of the lead, and also providing them additional education materials on how to minimize their exposure to lead. Another change in notification is that if the 90th percentile exceeds the action level, so again, 15 micrograms per liter for the entire system, then the entire system must be notified within 24 hours. It's now a tier 1 notification. So that's a big change as well. So again, it's trying to prioritize the lead service lines, the highest risk for lead. So there will be changes to the sampling protocols and the sampling locations for each utility. The next component is corrosion control treatment. And again, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Utilities has maintained compliance with the lead and copper rule. The lead and copper levels have been below those action levels since its inception. But the rule is now asking that utilities reevaluate their corrosion control treatment to make sure that it really is optimized. So that's really critical for utilities where the lead levels are near the cusp of the action level or near this new trigger level. And so there's different levels of what that study could entail, whether or not it's a desktop evaluation with water quality modeling software or using bench scale testing. We show a picture here with a small piece of copper pipe with lead solder being exposed to different water chemistries, all the way up to pipe loop testing, which we show in the bigger picture, where you're harvesting those lead service lines from the distribution and you're recreating those hydraulic conditions of allowing the water to flow through the pipes, and then the water sits there stagnant, allowing the water to react with the materials just like it would when a customer is sleeping. So these are some changes that utilities will have to look at to see if there are opportunities to improve their water chemistry as it relates to metal solubility. And the last change is the school and child care testing. Again, a big push on this rule is trying to increase that public transparency, public education. The youth are the most vulnerable to lead and its impacts on brain development. So this push is really to try and make sure that parents understand what the water quality is that their children are consuming while they're at school or daycare. And then hopefully those schools and child cares, if there are elevated lead levels discovered in a drinking fountain, they can make those modifications and get a newer material. Like Mike mentioned, there have been changes in the allowable lead content in these brass or bronze fixtures or faucets or drinking fountains. So maybe those need to be changed out to newer appliances. But so the way that the school and child care testing goes, it's looking at a 5-year testing cycle to get all schools and child cares tested throughout your service area. This is elementary schools, so kindergarten through 8th grade. If high schools want to be tested, they can reach out to the utility and request that, but it's really focusing on the younger age school children. So over a 5-year period, all of these locations would be tested, and then the utility would be done at that point unless there are schools or child cares that reach out and request a sample. So it's a 5-year program. And so with that, I think it's important to point out a few compliance dates and funding opportunities related to the lead and copper rule. So the rule was finalized in January of this year, but there was a change in administrations. And so the current EPA has chosen to take a look at the rule and have public comment periods to make sure that the rule is the way that they want it. And so with this, the effective date of the rule has been pushed back. It's December 16th of this year. So the EPA will be releasing information around that time. And due to pushing back the effective date, the compliance date has also been pushed back. So the current compliance date is October 16th of 2024. So just about 3 years from now. And the current administration has made a big push on trying to provide funding to help for these lead service line replacements. So there's funds available with the EPA's drinking water state revolving funds. There's WIFIA funds as well. And the current infrastructure bill, there was a request from President Biden that there be $45 billion available. The Senate approved 15, and now the House is trying to get that $30 billion back included in the available pot. So there should be money available for this. And so now I think Mike is going to discuss a couple of key lead and copper rule revision tasks that are included in these types of projects.
All right, thanks. So this is, quite a complex rule change, and just thinking through how it will impact utility customers. So, we think it's important that communication and transparency with the customers is kind of a robust program to get out in front, so that there isn't a misconception of or a concern that there is a water quality problem, which is not the case. It's just a matter of complying with the regulations. So making sure that we're looking at a variety of means to communicate with the customers, whether it's through mailers within their bills or surveys or even an interactive website, will be important to maintain that ability for customers to have the up-to-date information. We think that's an important component of community outreach, and so that you can maintain that public trust. So another opportunity with this program is the integration of existing city utilities or technologies, leveraging the databases and the platforms that you have and integrating them to make the data more easily available, readily usable, to track the progress of the program and be able to make decisions on a real-time basis. And so that'll be a key to leverage in a program such as this, where there's just a tremendous amount of data that's going to be generated and needs to be managed and tracked as we work through the program. And lastly, we see that there's really an opportunity for local partners from the MWB community, whether they're subcontractors or public relations or others. There's a lot of parts and pieces of this program that need to be managed and completed. And so being able to have availability and access to a variety of local firms is going to be important. And then also looking for opportunities to partner with other local utilities. We'll be supporting Greensboro and High Point. And so being able to communicate and collaborate among the three utilities and share information, especially as we use, common utility platforms or media platforms such as the press and so forth, having a concise message that is accurate for all three utilities, as I understand that you serve similar areas as well. So with that, that wraps up our presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
This is Harold Day. I got a question. What is our level of lead right now in our utilities here? Do you know?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. I believe I saw Bill Brewer on the call. He may know.
I can address that, Mike. Currently, our 90th percentile is well below the 15 parts per billion. We do occasionally have a detection, but it's usually, even when we do have detections, they're usually below the 15 parts per billion.
Well, I've done a lead study. I'm in the paint contracting business for 57 years, and 30 years ago, I done a lead study at Bowman Gray School of Medicine. And the outcome of that was painters had been in lead paint all their life. 6 to 7 parts per deciliter was the highest we got. And they're saying that was good because at that time, 40 parts per deciliter was high. And we had no one tested that was even up and above 10 all over the state. And the next thing is, what happens if somebody gets elevated lead levels? Do you know what the outcome of that is on long term?
Well, it depends on the age of the individual. Younger individuals are usually impacted more. But, we typically don't know the outcome because sometimes the health department is involved because there are alternate exposure avenues for lead. Like you mentioned, paint can be one avenue, water's another. So usually it has to be investigated to figure out what the root cause is.
Well, what we found out that the Bowman Gray done a study, they said that in adults, every 90 days to 6 months, it flushes the lead out of your system. And the results of it, when you get about 50 or 60 years old, you start having achy joints and loss of memory. So I guess we all got a little of it. But I was told at the time, Winston-Salem had the best water in the state at that time on lead. And I'm sure we still have those standards still.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, if Harold was finished, I've got a few questions.
Yeah, I'm finished.
So indulge me, I do have a few questions. This is Chris Parker. When we're talking about these connections, Mike and Emily, are we talking about we're going to be sampling every private connection within the city? or within our service area?
No, the requirement is that you have an inventory, and if you recall from the presentation, there's 4 categories of which to label the service lines. One of them was unknown. So the rule does not specifically require that utilities go out and sample every single service line. There is a methodology for determining what the service lines are that does not require that sampling, but it's a combination of your records and your data plus some field work to determine the materials at a small portion, and then some modeling activities to confirm that data or corroborate that data.
Okay, because if I had to guess, I would guess where the greatest exposure would be not on utility side, but on the private property side. And I mean, I think we've seen that within Flint, Michigan. And if it's the case that we determine that an issue is on the private property side, I know you're talking about there's billions of dollars potentially in this infrastructure bill. Is that what's going to help to pay these property owners to get their part fixed? Or is that money just for utilities to get their parts upgraded?
Well, the reality of that, and that's a great question. We've been asking that question of the EPA because many utilities have the same question, that they can't access the private side, and how is that going to be paid for? What we understand is that in these funding bills that Emily spoke about, is that a utility can leverage those funds to address the private side, or the side between the meter and the house. The details haven't been fully worked out, but an individual property owner couldn't apply for those funds. It would need to come through the funding programs are set up so that a unit of government applies for those funds and facilitates those replacements. But again, EPA has not officially come down and said that the utilities, you have to fund this, or you have to do this. It just said the rule states that the goal is to replace the whole service line to the house.
So if we had an individual that did not feel they could afford to or wish to pay for this, and we determined that there was unfortunately lead in the system, where does that leave us?
Yeah, so there are opportunities for customers to deny the ability for a utility to remove their portion of the service line. And in your system, the customer owns the service line. So we're hoping that will be rare instances where a customer would refuse to have that service line replaced. But the rule does allow for that. But the hope is that the funding can be available to help customers, because most customers aren't going to have between $5,000 and $10,000 to replace their portion of a service line tomorrow if you told them that it was lead. So that's where the EPA is trying to come up with funding to help, because it's the utilities don't have the money and the customers don't have the money is kind of the place where everybody's at the moment.
Yeah, because I just see Flint, Michigan, just in order to get that one system alone straight, since most of the private pipes have already been corrupted, is billions and billions of dollars for just that Flint, Michigan, much less for the whole country. Now, in there, you mentioned about the schools, there's going to be done about 20% a year over a 5-year period. but then in another slide, you said that we need to have this assessment done by the year 2024.
Okay, so yeah, let me take a step back and provide a little bit better clarity there. So the components that have to be done by the compliance date of October 2024 is first off the inventory. Then if it's determined that lead service lines, galvanized, requiring a replacement or any unknowns are found, then you have to have that lead service line replacement plan. You have to look at the new tier structure and identify your new sampling locations for your next round of compliance monitoring post the 2024 date. You have to have your inventory of all the schools and childcares ready to go, and plan of which schools get selected for your first year, that 20% that goes in year one. As well as developing public education and outreach materials. So those are the components that have to be done prior to the compliance date of 2024 October. And then after that, that's when you start 20% a year of sampling at schools and childcares. That's when you'll start doing your lead and copper rule compliance monitoring at 100 homes based on the new tier structure. You'll calculate your 90th percentile based on where that lies. You'll either have activities that have to be done, or you'll be below that trigger level and you'll be, you know, where you've always been. So. Okay.
So this is, I guess this is a pretty long time frame on this. So maybe let me cut to the chase to look at what we're facing today. And I don't know if I'm going to ask the questions now, but if this is something we need to address when we get to item 4. But item 4, we're basically voting on $2.5 million to Black and Veatch for consulting services on this. So my first question on that would be, any of this federal government money that's supposed to be coming out for lead and copper, are we going to be able to access this in order to pay for this initial $2.5 million consulting services? And then if I could also ask, what exactly are these consulting services going to provide? So I have an idea of where we came up with $2.5 million for it.
Right. So the, sorry, Courtney, were you going to step in?
Well, I guess I can let you go into the scope of services, but as far as the funding, Mr. Parker, I guess we won't know the requirements on what the funding can be used for until it's, until it's out there. It's same for ARPA. The ARPA funds have been made available, but there was specific, things that those funds can be used for. So whether or not it can be used for consulting services, and in addition to service line replacements, I guess that's yet to be determined. But obviously, any kind of funding that we can use, we'll definitely use. We'll try to.
Can we go back once they make that determination? Are we going to be able to go back and ask for that money if we've already approved it?
Again, it depends on how that funding requirements are written. I don't know that I can answer that question at this point. And Emily, I don't know if you have any more insight to the funding and how it can specifically be used, but until we know for sure, I just don't know that we can answer that at this point.
So were the other municipalities approving this level of funding without having that knowledge?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe if you could.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Parker.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the funding, my understanding is that the funding is primarily to help with replacing the service lines. And so part of the rule revisions include all the data inventory and the public outreach and everything like that. So but the big, a lot of the money or the expense is going to be replacing these lead service lines or any service lines that potentially could be an issue. And we won't know what level that's going to be until we do our inventory.
Yeah, I got it that 2.5 million is going to be minor compared to what the potential exposure is. But I've just got what is in front of us today. That's why I was asking these questions. So maybe how did we come up with 2.5 million, and where does that number come from?
And what specifically do we get for that? Yeah.
Well, specifically, what you get for that is that takes us through compliance. That October 24 of or October 16th of 2024, and so all the steps that it takes to get to compliance and your compliance plan submitted and approved through North Carolina DEQ. And so to walk through those steps, so like I mentioned earlier, there's going to be quite a bit of data that's generated from the program, but you also have a lot of data that's available. So getting that data organized and into usable formats so that it can be manipulated and implemented into the program, and develop the dashboards that will be community facing, that the customers will be able to access. The tracking dashboards that allow you to monitor and kind of manage the program for issuing the sample kits, the pitcher filters, follow up on test results, and the communication with the customers will be developed. So working through what data that you have, how we're going to manage the volume of data that's going to be developed in a usable format so that it's available for management of compliance for the future years is a pretty important and time-consuming effort. Developing of like I said, the service line, the actual service line inventory and the modeling of your system is a component that is part of the compliance effort, and confirming the data accuracy and the how that system is going to be integrated into your website and into your IT functions. There's, part of the modeling effort requires some field work, going out to selected sites and doing those potholing to confirm the materials of the existing service lines, to confirm or be able to say no, that it's not lead. That's a component of this, and that is used in the modeling effort to determine or make sure that the model is functioning accurately and will be able to be utilized in turning it over to DEQ for compliance approval. Working with your staff to identify the lead and copper monitoring sites. You have monitoring that's coming up in 2022, so we'll be assisting with getting sample kits out for that and supporting that testing. And then that data will be used to update your data dashboards. And then developing the service line replacement plan. Once we've developed the modeling, completed the field work, we'll have a better understanding of how much lead is in your system and what will need to be replaced. And so having a plan for that replacement, and then also developing SOPs and training for the various components, whether it's for your customers, such as how to do whole house flushing, how, the pitcher filter and things like that, and how to take samples, just so that it's clear and customers can easily step through the process for collecting samples. There's a component of the project that is ongoing coordination with DEQ and the EPA. We want to make sure that the program unfolds correctly, and there's no surprises, that the regulatory agencies are understanding and on board with how we're progressing. I mentioned public outreach and education, so there's a significant effort to be proactive with your customers, let them know what the program is, most importantly, what it's not. Develop the information and materials to keep the public informed and make sure that they're getting the education that they need to understand. And so there's also aspects where we're going to be communicating with the builder and development community, because as going into the future, the utility will have to track what material is put in even with new developments. So having a mechanism in place where that data is transferred seamlessly into your databases, working with plumbers to do the same thing, holding stakeholder meetings and workshops with, not only the community, but also groups such as childcare facilities, healthcare providers, food service industries, making sure that they're understanding their role in this program as well, and making sure that they're educated also.
So Mike,
yes,
it sounds like it's pretty comprehensive what you're talking about. So
yes, sir.
Just so I kind of have an idea. So when you came up with that number, it sounds like there's a lot of base educational development of the computer infrastructures and technologies that no matter what size utility you have, you're going to have to do those kind of base things. So was there also an analysis based upon, I don't know, many miles of pipe or many private connections into our system in order to come up with that number?
Yes, we had talked about the number of service connections and those things that we need to plan for as part of with development of the scope.
And so you're going to be taking, it sounds like, a lot more sampling than Bill Brewer and his crew are presently.
We're going to be working with Bill and his team on sampling. So yes, the field work in itself is one component, and that's a different kind of sampling where we go out with a vacuum excavator and expose the service line. And then there's also with the sampling that's coming up in 2022, we'll be working with Bill's team to make sure that all the sites are selected and that the sampling is in compliance with the requirements for that round of sampling.
From that, okay, so just one final clarification. What I'm hearing from you is that this item we're voting for, number 4 in the agenda for $2.5 million, you're saying that carries us all the way until completion of this assessment in 2024 with approval from Diener.
Correct.
Okay,
Mike,
thank you.
Mike, I've got one just kind of clarifying question. Do we get the service line inventory completed out of what you're doing? In other words, is that brought to us? Who's got what?
Yes.
Within our service? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
If I may clarify on that, even at the completion of the inventory, there still may be some unknowns, and that's acceptable under the rule. I just want to be clear on that there could be at the end of this some portion of unknowns that we still have to work through.
Mike, Tom Griffin, I've got a question about the modeling.
Yes, sir.
Are you with me? Okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure that the modeling that you're talking about doing, is that a model that was developed by EPA, or is that a model developed by Black & Veatch?
Actually, it was a model developed as a result of what happened in Flint. So it's a company called Blue Conduit. And it was mentioned the cost incurred by Flint to address their lead issues. And Emily, you know the background much better than me. But so Blue Conduit, they're PhDs from University of Michigan and Georgia Tech, professors who developed what's called a predictive model. And what they do is they take a sampling of data. It needs to be confirmed in the field. And essentially they run their model and they compare it to the actual field testing data. And what they've shown is that their accuracy is extremely good for predicting what the service line material is. And the benefit there is that you can imagine the cost to go around and pothole all of your service lines, dig them all up, the cost, the intrusion to the customer. And so this is a way to minimize that impact from a financial as well as intrusiveness to the customer.
But it's accepted by EPA.
It was accepted in Flint. The EPA, go ahead.
Yeah, it's been accepted by the state of Michigan, which is about 2 years ahead of the rest of the country because the state of Michigan came out with their own lead and copper rule in 2018. And so they're just much further ahead. Every utility in Michigan has already done their inventory. And so the predictive modeling has been approved by that state. The EPA in their lead and copper rule says that this sort of thing can be used to help develop an inventory. And now Blue Conduit has been in discussions with state regulators across the country, including NCDEQ, to discuss it being, an approved method. And in a lot of ways, states are waiting for the EPA to determine, does there need to be a % accuracy effective in order to say that they can use it. But it is being accepted in order to build your inventory.
So, Emily, is that what you're proposing to use in y'all's? Okay.
Yes.
So, the anticipation would be that the state of North Carolina and the federal government will eventually accept that. That's a gamble, a little bit of a gamble that we're taking.
A little bit. And I will just say that we've had a number of discussions with DEQ and their folks who are heading up the lead and copper rule revision response and talked to them about this very thing. And, they listen or wait on the EPA to for most of their, directives. But what they're telling us is that they understand that Michigan has accepted it, that the EPA has seen it. They're just waiting on the EPA to give, some additional guidance. But the folks from DEQ were open and knowledgeable about what this was and what it's used for.
So the state won't be an issue. It might, the feds would be the only thing we don't know about.
Right. But my instinct, my gut is that from the conversations that we've had, the EPA is well aware of this and, understand the cost impact of having to actually dig up all the service lines.
One other question, this may be Emily's. We're talking about service lines, but we may still have houses that have never been renovated, and even though the renovated house may have new plumbing inside with an old lead service line, you may have an old house that still has lead inside the house. We're not addressing that in any way, are we?
No, so there's one component of the rule that's called the find and fix, and I pointed that out when I discussed the changes in sampling. So if you find a home with an elevated lead level when you're taking that sample, the utility is asked to give education to that customer and do that follow-up sampling. But it really shouldn't be called find and fix because the utility is not on the hook for replacing internal plumbing or faucets or anything like that. That's on the customer. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
So, Courtney, is it fair to say that if you think about our past big programs like CSIP, that was a multi-year program that we hired a consultant engineer to advise us on. Same thing with AMI. Is this the best way to look at, is this another example of such program where we're embarking on a multi-year, pretty big programmatic effort?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
I think some of the questions have been really illuminating, but that this is, I don't want to say the tip of the iceberg, but this is just the beginning of a new program for us to follow in some of our other programs.
Yes, I would agree.
If I could add one thing too, typically the lead and copper rule revisions that have happened in the past, my department has been able to deal with effectively. This one is much more far-reaching and spans over multiple departments within the city, and that's why the coordination is going to be really important moving forward.
All right, cool. Thank you, Bill. If there are no other commission questions, I would suggest we move on with the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good conversation. And just to get us back on track a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the agenda items. And then if we have time, we'll go back to our normal updates. So let me share my screen. Okay. Mike Quivisto.
All right, thanks, Courtney. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Commission. Item 2 is our one operations item, which is consideration of a resolution authorizing execution of various agreements regarding proposed water and sanitary sewer improvements to be installed within various developments. This month, we have 2 developments for a total of $165,850 for water and $152,220 for sewer. This does include a refund of $13,545 to the developer of Tanglewood Forest for the cost of 210 feet of 6-inch water main, which will be installed along Kleiner Road to serve as a hydraulic tie at the request of WSFC Utilities for water pressure and quality purposes. Item number 3 is our first finance item, consideration of resolution requesting that the City Council of the City of Winston-Salem authorize the sale of property to the North Carolina Department of Transportation related to the widening of U.S. Highway 158. NCDOT is in the process of widening Highway 158 north of Salem Parkway to Blues Creek Road and is in need of obtaining fee simple right-of-way and permanent utility easement on property located at 5080 Reedsville Road and a total taking of 0.056 acre and existing improvements on property located at 4115 Reedsville Road. NCDOT has made an offer of the appraised value of $5,700 to purchase the right-of-way and permanent utility easement at 5080 Reedsville Road and $190,600 for the property and improvements at 4115 Reedsville Road, which are all needed for the construction of the project. Staff is supportive of the disposition of these properties and recommends approval.
Mike, it's Chris Parker.
Yes, sir.
You're going to need to give me a little more detail on a 0.082 acre that they're going to give us $190,000 for. Otherwise, I'm going to want to go out there and buy some land to sell to them.
Yes, there's an old water pump station on that property that's no longer in service. So that's why there's a significant value to that small piece of property.
So what happens to that? Are you saying the $190,000 is to deconstruct and do something? I'm still not following.
Mr. Parker, my understanding, and Kirk, correct me if I'm wrong about this, they're paying us $190,000 and some change for the property, the structure, and anything on that property. And then when they construct their project, any demolition work will be done at their cost.
Yes, I just point out that you're talking about 2 separate parcels in 2 separate locations on Reedsville Road. The first one, 5080, all they're taking, that's the current station in operation. All they're taking is some small right-of-way and permanent utility easement. There are no improvements at all. It's just a small amount of easement and fee simple. That's the $5,700 offer. On the other property, there is a brick structure there. My understanding is that the station is no longer in use, but it is a brick structure there. So that one, it's a total take. They're going to take the entire lot and all the improvements there. So that one is $190,600 at that location. And the majority of that is from the structure itself, not from the land itself, but from the structure that's being taken.
And that structure's been abandoned.
Correct.
Okay, well, let me just express one concern I have about this, and maybe Mike, you or Courtney could explain it to me. Whenever we get into these situations with NCDOT or even the city of Winston on one of the road development projects, and we end up having to pay all of this money to move pipe, it's because they've got the right of way. So because they have the right of way, whenever they decide to do something, suddenly it comes back on us. Doesn't matter how much public bond work got put into assessing what the cost of the road is for them to construct. Suddenly we have to pay millions of dollars to move pipe. So what are the ramifications when we start giving up right away like what we're proposing to do right now?
I think let's look at this, different ways. For this abandoned pump station, it is outside of the existing right of way. And if it was still in service, the DOT would have been responsible for paying to move it or relocate it. It's prior rights. If we were there, it's whoever was there first has to pay for the relocation of the infrastructure.
Right. So since this is abandoned, there's not a concern for us. They're just purchasing the needed right of way, and obviously we have an asset there, a building, so they're paying us for that as well.
Okay.
It's Tom. Flip the other picture up of the sewer pump station. Yeah. When I saw that and you had the whole thing circled in red, I'm thinking the number that went with the taking didn't match the size, but it appeared we were getting rid of the whole pump station. And I think a little more background information in these items would be helpful to let us know exactly what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, will do.
Understood. Item 4 is consideration of resolution awarding a contract for lead and copper rule compliance program consulting services. You all have heard from the Black & Veatch staff, a presentation from them. Black & Veatch was selected to provide the consulting services for this program through our request for proposal process. Staff negotiated a fee of $2,516,355 with Black & Veatch for these services and finds this fee reasonable, recommends approval. Are there any additional questions about this item at this time? Okay, move on to item 5, which is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for the meter services building renovation project. The city advertised bids for the meter services building renovation project, which includes renovations to the existing 2,100 square foot meter shop building, a 1,500 square foot building expansion, repaving of the entire parking lot, installing a new fire hydrant and water service line, and associated site work. The bid alternate is to re-roof the 2,100 square foot existing meter shop building, so the entire roof will be the same age and under the same warranty. Just for information, the building is located near Utilities Field Operations off of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. It's behind Henry's Electric Motor Service, if anybody knows where that is. Bids were received for this project on September 9th with Bar Construction, Inc., the low bidder with a base bid of $1,506,750 and a bid alternate of $51,000 to replace the roof of the building, which staff recommends accepting as well. Bar Construction agreed to subcontract goals other than those established for this project. Therefore, pursuant to the Utility Commission's MWBE policy, the internal MWBE committee met to consider the bidder's good faith efforts. After reviewing the documentation submitted by the bidder, the committee determined that the bidder did make good faith efforts to achieve the goals. It is recommended that a contract for the meter services building renovation project be awarded to Bar Construction Company, Inc. in the base bid plus bid alternate amount of $1,557,750. The architect's estimate for the project was $379,148.
This Harold, I got a question. All these new meters we're putting in, do we still have to work on those? I thought they was under warranty for 20 years. I'm just asking. I mean, we're spending all this money for meters that we're replacing, and they're supposed to be guaranteed for 20 years. Why do we need to spend this kind of money to upgrade a meter shop that we're obsolete here in another year?
So, Mr. Day, we'll still have people that will go out and install, service, maintain what we have. We obviously have new meters that we need to install. There will still need to go out and address customer issues and concerns. We'll still have a staff to do that. We still may need to, until we get the system up and running, we may need to still read some meters manually. We may need to read them via AMR, drive-by method, and the space is outdated, and it's being renovated with the intent to build it for the future of what that organization is intended to look like.
Okay, I'm just questioning.
Understood. All right, item number 6 is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for customer satisfaction survey services. Winston-Salem County Utilities desires to conduct annual customer service surveys to track customer satisfaction with the services provided by the department. City County Purchasing issued a request for proposal to provide these services, with 2 proposals received on August 31st. The proposals were reviewed by city staff, and based upon the evaluation panel's assessment, it is recommended that a contract for customer satisfaction survey services be awarded to ETC Institute, Inc. in the initial contract amount of $35,275. Terms of the RFP reserve the right for the commission to extend the service contract for as many as 2 additional 12-month periods with an annual increase of 2% each year, if both parties agree and funds are made available for that purpose, for a potential total estimated contract value of $107,955.61.
Mike, Tom, is it the staff's intent to eventually do this survey every year? Is that what we're headed for?
I think that is what we're anticipating, Mr. Griffin, just to see, just to track and monitor and adjust the questions and results, or to monitor the results, to gauge and track our service levels, the effectiveness of our communication, which methods that are most effective, and how that changes over time.
Okay.
Okay, item 7 is consideration of a resolution requesting that the City Council of the City of Winston-Salem approve a long-term lease agreement between the City of Winston-Salem and Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utilities and Forsyth County for space on the jointly owned city-county radio tower located off of Amp Drive. For background on this item, in November of 2000, the citizens of Winston-Salem approved an $11.5 million bond referendum to fund the city's share of the cost of a new jointly owned city-county 800 megahertz public safety radio system. In June of 2002, the city and county approved an interlocal cooperation agreement that provided for the joint installation, operation, and maintenance of the system. And the county's interagency communications department currently oversees the operation and maintenance of the system, for which there are 8 locations around the county, 8 towers. The city of Winston-Salem, along with Winston-Salem County Utilities, have requested to use the space on the AMP Drive radio tower in Clemens for the limited purpose of installing an advanced metering infrastructure base station. The city and county will enter into, the city and Winston-Salem County Utilities will enter into a lease agreement with Forsyth County for $5,000 per year with an annual increase in the same amount as the consumer price index during the preceding lease year. Terms of this lease would be for 20 years. The Forsyth County Board of Commissioners approved the lease on August 19th of 2021. And this is the first of 6 of these leases on city county owned towers that are needed for the AMI project. Our intent is to bring one more item with the remaining 5 leases at some point in the near future.
Mr. Harold, how many of these towers are we going to lease for this system where you're putting in? Do you know?
So it should be, so the ones that were not anticipated really for as part of the census contract initially are really the 6 city county owned towers
But we're not
that we've negotiated.
We're not going to own any other towers other than the 6 or 7 right now.
Well, we've got the city owned, we're using 6. The city has an older radio system that has 6 towers that we're just locating on that. We're not being charged for those. We're using 7 of our existing water tanks, 5 private towers. We're installing a few monopoles. But the intent here with these city county owned 800 megahertz towers is that they're located where we need them to be in the height. It's the height of the towers that gets us the big benefit there.
Yeah, I understand. I just wonder how many we got to use in the system before we get through. That was my question. Okay.
It'll be 6 of these. Yes, Mr. Tuttle.
I was just saying thank you. I was going to see if any of the commission members had any questions on any of the agenda items 1 through 7. Hearing none.
I'd like to move approval for items 1 through 7. It's Chris Parker.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second, Tom.
Second, and as part of discussion, do any commission members want to pull any of the items 1 through 7 for consideration separately? Okay, any discussion on the motion to approve by consent agenda items 1 through 7? Hearing none, Ms. Glenn, would you call the roll? A roll call vote, please.
Okay. Vice Chair Wesley Curtis.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard Day.
Yes.
Commissioner Tom Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Hugh Jernigan.
Yes.
Commissioner Dwayne Long.
Yes.
Commissioner Chris Parker.
Agreed.
Commissioner Charles Wilson.
Yes.
And Commissioner Alan Younger.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patrice, and thank you, commission members, for that really good discussion. Courtney, turn it back over to you, and we can take the meeting either forward or backwards to where you wanted to go before.
Okay, yes. So we'll go back to our water and wastewater updates. We'll go back to that point. So share my screen again. Okay. Michael Stover will give you an update about Bethabara Road.
Thank you, Courtney. And let's go back to that last picture real quick. I want to point out that is an early picture of when Nilsen was constructed. And I believe if you pay close attention, that's Tom Griffin's car on the right. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure. But we thought that was a pretty deep picture.
I'm glad Mr. Griffin hopefully is on mute right now.
I'm laughing my way through it.
Okay, Courtney. We wanted to follow up on the Bethabara Road water main break from last month. If you remember at the September meeting, we had this water main break. There was a 24-inch and 12-inch water main break that washed out a significant portion of Bethabara Road. Since then, we've been working to get the water mains repaired, which they've been done, the road rebuilt, guardrails, curb, sidewalk poured back. Those 2 main breaks emptied 4 out of our 14 water tanks. We had issues isolating the water due to unknown hydraulic connections. Due to that, we had to install line stops, temporary line stops to stop water so we can make the water main repairs. And I'll show you a picture of that here in a second. We quickly knew once we got on site that Monday morning that the scope of work was significantly more than our in-house crews could bite off. And the city manager issued an emergency declaration in accordance with General Statute 143-129E2. And that allowed us to find a contractor and facilitate a quick repair. We called Ramey Incorporated. They're under contract with the Water Main Improvements contract. They're local. They do really good work, and they responded within 30 minutes. Courtney, if you want to advance the slide out, we'll show a couple pictures. This is a picture from Monday, the day of the break. You can see the 24-inch main has fallen down a couple places, and the 12-inch is sticking out to the right. We do believe that Mr. Tuttle, he asked the question last month, what was the cause? And we could not find any defect in the 24-inch main. The 24-inch main is newer. It was built in the 80s. The 12-inch main is cast iron. It was a little older than the 24. We think that the 12-inch failed and started washing out and undermining the 24-inch line. And then once that was gone, the 24-inch collapsed and then caused just severe damage. Next slide. The picture on the left is a line stop. We had to hire a subcontractor to come out and install line stops to stop the flow. Basically, they install a saddle on top of the pipe, tap it, and then that device on top in blue, they screw that down, and it's like a plug that seats inside the pipe and stops the flow temporarily. And then the picture on the right, that is the new 24-inch and 12-inch pipe sleeved in with probably 5 or 6 feet of stone backfill that we had to build back up just in order to get to make the repair. Any questions on the Bethabit Road main break?
I did. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I just, weren't there some reports of some cars or something that were turned over or?
There were 2, my understanding, there were two wrecks, both related to the break. I don't really know any details other than that. Okay. I can tell you this, there were pieces of one of the cars in the hole that we removed.
Okay.
Mike, unknown hydraulic connections. Can you elaborate?
Sure thing. First thing we do when we have a main break, we check our GIS, check our as-built, locate the nearest valves either side of the break, and we isolate those valves. We shut them down and stop the water. GIS, we went to every valve that it should have taken to shut the water off, and we still had flow. Now, it throttled the water down probably 80%, but that last 20% was still enough flow where we couldn't get in there and safely make a repair. So then we went to our as-built database. Those were the record drawings for when the lines were installed. And they correlated with GIS. So that was, the first 4 days, we're trying to find those valves. And after 2 days, when we realized that, we couldn't get the water off, we started getting the line stop contractor on board, and they were making these line stops. On Friday morning, after 5 days, one of our technicians, Chuck Wishon, he went on a wild goose chase, and just by sheer luck, he found a connection that wasn't marked on GIS, wasn't marked in in an as-built that was made fairly recently, we believe, but was not documented. He turned that off, water stopped immediately.
Connection was made fairly recently, but is that something that we did?
It's not something that we did. We're still trying to investigate and see who did it.
Where does it go?
When it was done. I think from what I remember, it was close to the intersection of Indiana Avenue. I don't know what work took place there, but when I say recently, I mean in the last 10 years.
Anybody call and complain they're out of water?
No, not yet. And by the way, everybody's back in water. We had everybody back in water that week. Really on Monday, everybody was back in water. We had low pressure calls and concerns that came through. But as far as having water, Monday, everybody had water. Any other questions?
Mike, how long did it take us to get our tanks filled back up?
After we got the water completely shut down on Friday, they started gaining ground almost immediately.
So it's good.
And Mr. Brewer, he pulled the SCADA reports, and I'll go over this in a minute, but our water production, our demand is inflated due to this main break. We think we lost probably between 60 or 70 million gallons of water due to this one event. Okay. As Courtney mentioned earlier in the meeting, there were some emails going back and forth about the use of PVC in our water system. So we have evaluated that over the years multiple times, and PVC is included in our water sewer technical specifications for the following applications. It is just not allowed under the certain application that this project is going through. So right now we allow PVC for 2-inch water main installations, 4 6-inch restaurant sewer connections, 4-inch diameter smaller sanitary sewer force mains, and inside drop manhole assemblies for your sanitary sewer system. What we found, material standards vary from utility to utility. Raleigh, Greensboro, Orange County Water and Sewer Authority, and City of Durham, they have similar specifications to us. Charlotte, Fayetteville, High Point, they do allow PVC for water mains and sewer. One of the biggest things that we evaluate when we look at specifications is full life cycle analysis versus the initial investment of the pipe itself. There's some very tangible and obvious benefits of ductile iron pipe over PVC. When you look at the life cycle cost of PVC, you have to take into account tracer wire, because it's plastic, it's hard to locate, additional stone backfill to support the pipe, and additional inspection costs. And once you start considering those factors, the price is pretty competitive to ductile iron. Courtney, did you want to add anything to this conversation?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. You know, I think we do require ductile for our water line installations. You know, that way we don't have to decide if it's too deep, if the line gets installed too deep, like if we use PVC and it's too deep or it's too shallow, we just say ductile for all installations for water, and unless it's a 2-inch, we do allow it there. So I don't know if the commission, this is really in response to the emails, and our technical specifications have always been developed at the staff level. So this is more of an FYI and to see if anybody has any questions, but if not, we'll just continue going.
So can you explain again the additional inspection costs again? Is that you just have to be more careful about how deep the PVC is, or where is that what you're saying, versus ductile iron just doesn't matter?
Ductile iron can go in pretty much any application. Right. Superior strength, you know, you don't have to worry as much about, you know, construction, right. You know, activity. for PVC, you got to worry about several things, handling the pipe, backfill, subgrade, compaction.
Okay.
And that's where the additional inspection costs come into play.
Gotcha.
And folks, I just want to make, obviously Courtney and I talked about this, and I think there's to me, whenever I serve on boards, there's a certain important distinction between what are board responsibilities, such as governance and overall finances, versus staff responsibilities, which are day-to-day decision-making. And we decided that this fell into the staff responsibilities, and nor did I don't, we have short terms as commission members, and I didn't think any of us wanted to be overruling staff on something that they said they didn't believe in, and then we could roll off, and then something would happen down the road. So Courtney and I felt this was more of a staff decision, not the board decision for the commission.
Yeah, and I agree too, Randall. I think, to me, I just think it's just good information just to know. So as we're looking at these emails coming back and forth, just to be able to say, oh, that's why, and we go on. And there might be something that we might say that staff can use to help them maybe make a different decision about certain things. That's all. So yeah, but I agree. It is certainly a staff decision in day-to-day operation, but it's just good to know why.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Randall, I got a question about PVC. Is water standing in miles of pipe, PVC pipe, what leaches off the PVC into the drinking water? That would be a question I'd like to know in long term.
Can you say that again, Mr. Day?
About water standing in PVC pipe for long term where it's not being cycled too good. Does PVC leach off anything into the water system? Not that I'm aware of. I think the only thing that from my research, when others might know more than I do, but from my research, the only concern with PVC is, if you install it through a contaminated site with maybe fuel contamination or something like that, it could permeate through the plastic pipe itself. But as a kid, we have the water hose and it tasted pretty nasty, but we drank it anyhow.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Conveyance dashboard, this graph looks the same, but it actually is a little different. Historically, we have showed number of water and sewer permits that we've issued rather than what has actually been conveyed by the commission, what you guys have approved. So we've changed this to reflect number and value of the infrastructure that has formally been conveyed to the water and sewer systems. So far this year, we've issued 41 conveyance agreements for a total value of $8.1 million. And then the next slide will be the same slide you're familiar with the breakdown on water and sewer mileage. So far in FY 21 or 22, 5.2 miles of water and 8 miles of sewer has been conveyed. Here's the drought monitor and rainfall charts. So far this year, we are a little behind where we were last year, really in years past as far as rainfall goes. Forsyth County is not, in any drought conditions like some of the eastern parts of the state are right now. Water production slide, as I mentioned earlier, our numbers are inflated due to Bethabara Road. Water production's up. It's showing is up, 13.5% or 4.9 million gallons per day. But a lot of that, I think, is due to Bethabara Road. And then the basin received 3.63 inches of rain in September, which is slightly below average, but pretty close. Collection system update. We did receive the reports for July of 2021. We had 0 notice of deficiencies, 3 notice of violations, one of which they have intent to enforce action that we have to respond to, and with details of the situation. And we'll see if we get a penalty for that at a later date. Sanitary sewer overflows per 100 miles. We had a really good month in September. we had one sanitary sewer overflow. So, in August, we were kind of above where we were the last 2 years. And due to a really good month, we're now below where we were the last 2 years. So on pace for another record year. Sanitary sewer overflows by cause, as I mentioned, one SSO in September due to pipe failure. And I believe this is my last slide. Cleaning productivity. We've been tracking this for several months, even in the last fiscal year. We have a gap we need to close. We are above our 10% permit requirement, still below our 20% scheduled cleaning goal. And as Courtney mentioned earlier in the meeting, a lot of that is vacancies. Not only in-house vacancies. I know our sewer cleaning crews are struggling with vacancies, but contract crews as well. And COVID's had an impact. So we have met with both of our cleaning contractors, Taplin and KRG. They've committed to adding additional resources and crews. And we think we have a recovery plan to close that gap in the next couple months. We'll keep an eye on it. Any questions on any of the water and wastewater updates? Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Here's our monthly look at the water and sewer operating expenditures for FY22, which are represented by the blue bar, which is lower than last year at the same time, which last year is represented by the red bar. And we're also under the budget, which is represented by the light blue shaded area there. On the revenue side, we've started the first 3 months of the fiscal year slightly ahead of last year and also ahead of the budget. So this slide shows our past due balances ticking up in September. While the city and county continue to work to increase participation in the emergency rental assistance program, we've not seen heavy participation from our water and sewer customers in that program. As of early September, we've gotten about $125,000 for water and sewer customers from that program. We're waiting for an update there, but if you look, Courtney, if you go to the next slide, which shows the delinquent accounts, they also increased in September. So, look, I guess the good news is the city and county will be receiving additional funds for customer assistance, and those funds will have fewer stipulations and requirements. So hopefully we can get some more folks some help. In the meantime, we're working on other ways to reverse this trend, which will likely result in more delinquent customers having their services cut off for non-payment.
Mike, can you give us any history? I mean, when did we start cutting off, and what are the numbers?
So we started cutting off in early January, and we just have been cutting off the customers that have reached our collection stage that are very delinquent. And we've been triaging the folks with the highest balances, and due to limited resources, I don't actually have the numbers on the number of accounts for you, Mr. Tuttle, but we see that what we're doing there, and then the assistance that's out there, and we've advertised the assistance twice with our customers. We've done direct mailings to our customers who are delinquent about the funds being available. The message is out there on social media quite frequently as well. It's been in the newspaper, on the news. And so based on what we're seeing, it looks like folks just aren't, without us getting out there and turning off their service, they're not coming in to pay. So.
And then that's my question. I guess I'm out of 11,000 delinquents. Have we cut off 100 or 500 or 3,000?
I would say it's probably maybe closer to 500. But yes, so So yes, we need to ramp up our efforts, and we've talked with our meter services folks about what we can do there, and we've got some options, and we're hoping to reverse that trend soon.
Okay.
Can you remind me again, Mike, of what the past number of delinquents have been?
I know that's a lot in a little bit of time. But
Prior to, yeah.
So, we don't have, we've had them. That's a good question, Mr. Curtis. And my stumbling over my words basically means I don't have a good answer for you. In the past, we've had the number of delinquent accounts has been higher in the 8,000 range prior to the pandemic. It had been ramping up prior to the pandemic due to staffing shortages and us being unable to get out there and make as many cutoffs as we would have liked. But it's definitely higher than we want it to be, and we think we can manage it down.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start out with the first quarter financial results for solid waste operations. You can see the expenses, that's personnel and operating, are at $1.3 million through the end of September. That's below the budget and below last year. We were about 1.7 at this point last year. And revenues at the same point in the year are at 3.4 million compared to a budget of about 2.9, and last year we were at about 2.8. The revenues are up. The primary source of those revenues, as you probably know, is the tonnage that we take in at Haynes Mill Road landfill, and we've taken in 78,470 tons. And so that's a little bit ahead of last year. We were just under 70,000, and the budget is about 66,000 for this point in the year. We did decrease a little bit in the month of September down to 22,887. And that's primarily due to a couple of construction projects that have been completed that boosted our tonnage in the summertime. And we're seeing kind of a similar situation at Old Salisbury Road, where it was decreased a little bit in September, but we're still at 11,607 tons. So we're ahead of last year and ahead of the budget at that facility as well. So we didn't have any items, no other updates on solid waste for this year, unless you have, this month, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to real quick, we won't go through all of our capital. We'll skip ahead real quick, yeah. We won't go through our full capital update, but I know we did have an item regarding AMI, so Mike's going to give just a brief update on AMI, and then that leaves us a little bit of time at the end to circle back around and talk about anything that the commission might want to talk about before we end the meeting.
Okay, thanks again, Courtney. So we have completed the field work for our alpha and beta initial deployment, which is just a little less than 10,000 meters. The alpha base station is installed and the meters are communicating with the radio network there. We're continuing the software implementation and integration activities. Right now, everything is going well in that regard and looking good. The gamma phase, which is approximately 34,000 meters, is our second phase of our initial deployment, which was approved by the commission in June. Meter box inspections with lid replacements are underway, and the meter installations will begin shortly. We're currently anticipating the completion of the gamma phase in what we're hoping will be the fall of 2022. But we're monitoring supply chain delays for meters and radio endpoints caused by the worldwide computer chip shortage that could impact the schedule if we continue to see delays. But we have seen a slowdown in the number of meters that we're able to receive. So, but we are a priority customer for Census, and they're doing their best to get us what we need to meet our deadlines. And then here's a map, an updated map with the gamma areas shown in red, with the beta deployment areas in purple in the southeast and southwest areas of the county. And the base stations that have been installed are the small circles in green, while the yellow circles show the base stations that still need to be installed. And then regarding the base stations, we've got 10 out of the 29 installed. We'll be bringing the additional lease agreements with the county to you all as soon as possible. Any questions on the status of the AMI project? All right, thank you all.
Thank you. So I don't know, Chairman Tuttle, if you have anything to discuss, or if anybody on the commission has any thoughts or questions that we want to use the last couple of minutes to.
You know, I think Courtney, I'm sorry, let me say one thing, then I'll ask for questions and comments. But Courtney did preface in her earlier comments, we have significant shortages right now in terms of staffing. And that is before a possible vaccine mandate on behalf of the city. And I don't know the current numbers, but our percent of employees vaccinated right now is pretty low. And so I think, you know, Courtney, my comment would be, I think we need to start brainstorming what we're going to do if 64, which is, you know, getting near 20% vacancy, is persists or even increases, and will to maintain good, safe working conditions, will we need to curtail services? And so that's maybe a month or two plan for you to work on. But I'd love to hear other commission members.
Courtney, I've got a question. All of our subs that we use, and we have a hard time getting people to bid our work, are they going to have to be fully vaccinated to go on our work sites?
I do not know the answer to that question, Mr. Day, and I'll have to.
I'm just thinking, you know, I know what's going to happen, because I know a lot of people are not going to do it.
I think what, may I interrupt? I think staff doesn't want to get ahead of what's going to be presented to the city council maybe tonight. And so we'll probably know a lot more in the next week or so.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get covered for Courtney and her team.
Thank you. So, and Aaron King had to jump off, but he obviously is more knowledgeable and is involved in those in those conversations more so than I am. But I don't know the answer to that question, but definitely something that we'll have to consider.
Can you give us any information about Muddy Creek Pump Station?
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, if you don't mind, can I hold that for a second? I want to finish the vaccine and
sure,
vacancy for. I mean, I think it's a great question, but I just want to see if anybody else has any. You know, Hugh and I had talked earlier, and we talked about landfill staffing, and with unfortunately our recent accident, you know, we need to be ultra safe, even more safe than normal, and so I do think we've got to start thinking creatively, either to get more employees, and what are the latitudes that we can take as an enterprise fund, like can we offer bonuses or signing bonuses, or we just cannot afford to be unsafe in our actions. So, but any other commission members, I don't want to be the only one talking here.
I'd like to reinforce what you said, Commissioner Tuttle. It's important that leaders lead, right? And we're in a public health crisis. I know that there are people who believe what they believe, and they have a right to do that. However, I believe it's our responsibility to do everything that we can to increase the likelihood that it will be a safe situation for all of our employees.
Randall and Courtney, it's Chris. I think that they're probably, based on what you had said earlier, it's not just going to be if there is something, it won't be a complete vaccine mandate. There will be the option to get weekly testing. And I would imagine there's going to be a cost to that. I don't know how that's going to be paid for, but as long as that's set up to where it's convenient for the staff, I'm not sure what kind of impact it would be versus a complete, like the hospitals have about a complete, you've got to be vaccinated. I think having that testing exemption should hopefully help mitigate continued losses to staff. Now, I would say we're kind of constrained because we're in the city pay structure. So as we look at I think Randall said 20% vacancy rate, there's a possibility if we raised wages that we might be able to bring some of those back, but yet I don't know what that magical figure is. But the question would be, how much flexibility do we really have since we are operating under the city pay structure?
Well, I can address those comments. You're right, we're under the city pay structure. One of the options that we're currently looking at is a hiring bonus. And maybe even a referral bonus. So Aaron and I are planning on meeting with our HR director as well as the department head or the director of another department that is seeing staff shortages, particularly in the area of equipment operators right now. So we're going to talk through that as an option. So can there be a hiring bonus, referral bonus? Another option that we've looked at is potentially modifying the hours at the landfill. So if we don't have enough staff, we certainly don't want to overwork our staff. So do we modify or shorten the hours, which is obviously an inconvenience to our customers and really not something we want to take lightly or do if we don't have to, but that's a potential option as well. We're really hurting for equipment operators right now. There's several vacancies and, at all levels of the organization, but we do have a significant number of equipment operators that we have vacant.
Okay, if no other questions, then Mr. Griffin asked about Muddy.
Okay, so Mr. Griffin, I'll give you an update as well as others. We have had some mediation sessions with the contractor, and I won't go into too much detail, but we have a mediation agreement, and it involves having 4 mediation sessions. So we've had 2 of those 4, and we're in the process of scheduling and working through the 3rd mediation session. I can, if the commission would like, I can schedule a closed session at our next meeting in November, just to give us the opportunity to discuss in more detail, knowing that we may not be at a point where we have that much to update, but it gives you the opportunity to have where we can have that open discussion.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that would be a good idea.
Okay.
Who is the mediator? Do you know his name or her name?
It's Richard Connor.
Okay.
And he was our mediator facilitator back in 2017 when we were trying to do some reset meetings back then. So he's very familiar with the project.
Right. Thanks.
You're welcome. I know there was a question Mr. Parker asked earlier about the ARPA funds. Again, on this topic, there's not that much to update. I know the city is working on a scoring matrix and a scoring criteria so that they can advertise for funding for applications so that the different entities can apply for the funds. So we're working on that scoring matrix, but the application has not been released at this point. The county, of course, did have an application process with those due at the end of August. I do not have an update on, where they're at with making decisions for funding, for the county. Anything else?
Briefly, can you comment on our relationship with some of these peripheral accounts? I believe we're selling water to East Bend. Is that correct?
Jackson County.
Okay, so that's still continuing.
Yes.
Our relationship with Davie County is fine with what we're doing there.
Yes.
And anything going on with Stokesdale and Northern Guilford County, Oak Ridge, those folks?
Yes, there have been some conversations. We've had conversations with them for a couple of years now, and I don't have my calendar pulled up in front of me, but do we have a meeting tomorrow, Michael Stover? Don't we tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Okay. So I'll know more tomorrow, but we do have a meeting tomorrow.
And is that Oak Ridge?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Well, we have been talking about staff shortages and problems a lot, but I just wanted to commend all the staff for what they have been doing in spite of these staff shortages. It's been doing a great job, which could cause us compliance problems with several issues, with several departments, because we don't have enough people, but the people are working hard everywhere. So I really, personally, myself, I really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's
Any other commission member?
Compliance too is also very important.
Any other commission members have thoughts to bring before the commission? Okay, Mr. Day.
It's my time, is it? I'd like to make a motion. We adjourn this meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Glenn.
Okay. Vice Chair Wesley Curtis.
Yes.
Commissioner Harold Day.
Yes.
Commissioner Tom Griffin.
Do it, Tom.
It's either the video or the, yeah.
I heard a yes, Ms. Glenn.
Okay. Commissioner Dwayne Long.
Yes.
Commissioner Chris Parker.
I concur.
Commissioner Charles Wilson.
Yes.
Commissioner Alan Younger.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and I think we all concur with Mr. Jernigan. Thank you to staff for all the hard work and as well for a good meeting today. We learned a lot. So hope everybody has a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.